If you're in the city of Utica, you probably heard we got $60 million of ARPA funding. And I get asked all the time, how is it being spent? Now, ARPA, A-R-P-A, American Rescue Plan Act, was designed to help revitalize cities that were most impacted by COVID. So consider this just the overview, because there's probably over 50 different projects of how this money will be used and already has been allocated in some cases. And just for context and full transparency, some of this video is coming from a place of, for me personally as a council person, there's one project that I was so passionate and so excited about to see come to fruition, and that is the new skate parks coming to Utica. Now, I get a lot of flack for this sometimes, and people tend to say, well, what about XYZ? Just because they see one thing being funded, they think all these other things aren't, and it's just not true. So we hear this like whataboutism all the time, and it's quite frustrating. But I get it, because I've been there. And all it takes is conversations and context like this, and then people are like, oh, I get it. So let's start from the beginning. American Rescue Plan Act. The City of Utica got $60 million. Oneida County as a whole only got $44 million. Only. There's a lot of ways you can spend ARPA funding, but there's a lot of ways you can't. Like, you can't just pay back old debt. They want to see it reinvested into the community. One of the things I found fascinating is how did we get that money allocated for us? That largely was based on a formula of the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant formula. It was based on 3 different criteria. Number 1 is housing stock built before 1940. Our average home in Utica was built in 1932. Second was population. Third is poverty rates. There is another formula, but I'm pretty sure they went with that one considering how much funding we received. The other thing to note is all of this money has to be spent by the end of 2024. When Utica was deciding where the money should go, we had already recently had our DRI, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, and part of that we already had a huge intake of the needs in the city, and that was back when we only had 10 million to spend. So this was a couple years ago, but a lot of that was just all open public forums. It was a huge board and crew of people helping decide where that 10 million was going. It was really good that we already had that kind of foundation. Next, there was a survey done. It was a public survey. I remember taking it. It was the Utica Prosperity Initiative. And a lot of people wrote in what they would like to see done in that. Well, people wrote in and made suggestions about the parks. And I think the skate park crew is one of my favorite examples, because these were people who were using their park for years, maintaining it themselves in a lot of ways, and then they came to the city to common council meetings. They used public comment and they voiced up and said, hey, these are the needs. We are out here all the time. How can the city help? So that was already on the city's radar even before ARPA came into play. We have over 600 acres of parks in our city. If you don't know anything about this, go check out the Utica Olmsted City Parks on YouTube. There's a whole series on it, just explaining to the novelty of what our park infrastructure is here and how it's so unique and how it really separates Utica from pretty much any other city in the country. I would say over $20 million of this ARPA funding is being reinvested into parks. And I'm excited about this, not just because I want Uticans to use it and be able to enjoy all aspects of their city. It's a huge attraction to people who want to move here, but it's also a huge attraction for tourists. And that tourism industry generates revenue, and that revenue will produce taxes to help us fund things like more roads. So while 60 million would not have been a drop in the bucket to pave all our roads, I like where the city is going of, let's play the long game here. Let's invest in our community, give something for the kids to do, make a city where people can have a lot of pride in, and the rest will follow. So phase 1, number 1 on the list is childcare expansion. Almost $500,000 is going towards that. A big goal and initiative in Utica is 24/7 childcare. Number 2, rehiring city staff. You know, when COVID happened, we have a lot of catching up to do. During the shutdown, people who couldn't work and maintain our city in the same way, it's kind of all hands on deck. Number 3, new James Street Marketplace with loft apartments. 4 is Small Business Assistance Fund. That's $500,000. Number 5 actually jumps down and breaks into a few of the different park enhancements. At TR Proctor Park, what we see is we're going to get a new baseball field, ideally with turf. You're gonna get that skate park, the brand new one that will be a tourist attraction for people from all over the world will be coming here. I'm not kidding. It's gonna be busy. But that area will also, they're kind of making TR Proctor Park like a one location to do everything. A one-stop shop of if you're a parent, you're going there because your kids can play baseball, they can go on the skate parks, they can play in the soccer fields, they can hit up the splash pad. That's going to be really great for families, and that'll be cool. So other areas that are getting work is, if you're in the first ward, actually I have my handy map. If you're in the first ward, Chancellor Park is getting, for phase 1, it's $1.5 million of upgrade. So one of the things we're going to see is kind of revitalize that area. You'll have bocce ball courts. There will also be a sensory garden in that park. I'm so excited about that because right across the street you have Cab V. FT Proctor Park will be getting a pavilion and restrooms. So next up, this was a great program. It was the residential rehab program. So $1 million of this went to owner-occupied homes, and another $1 million went to the rental rehab program of homes. We had $2 million initially. Basically, they teamed up with a home ownership center and they said, what is the biggest need? They said, we get constantly asked people need support with repairing the exterior of their homes. Number 7 was necessary public facility repairs. Now with that, it was $1.5 million. So City Hall needed a new air handler, and then police and fire stations needed a new HVAC systems. With the $1 million for gun violence prevention, we are seeing a lot of how we are supporting our police through There Are More Police. We're getting them more body cams, and we're also getting about 50 more cameras set up in high-risk crime areas throughout the city. That's not the only way to try to attack the gun violence. You'll see more as we go on, and I'm not talking about the literal sense of supporting just the police, which I'm glad we are, but if you don't know all our police department does, I think that's going to be another video I need to make, especially with the crisis prevention team of our social worker and our police officer who go out on respond to calls together for mental health services. That's a whole nother video. So number 9, almost $3 million, and that's with additional street paving and the Dudley Ave sewer project that needed to be done. Number 10, upgrade of city's website and electronic services. I'm very excited about this. That is about $500,000. So we'll be seeing more of how the city will be updating their web services. So that's just phase 1. We also have phase 1.5 as the money was being allocated and being spent, and we had that home ownership renovations happening. We saw like that was a major need. So what the city did is they actually made a 1.5 phase, and they said, let's fund this more. It's clearly working and is super needed. So they added another $1 million to that program. And then phase 2 was another $20 million of projects. So let's cruise through this. Children Museum Programming, $2 million. On Point for College, $200,000. Pathways to Justice Career Mentorship Program, $500,000. Empowerment Center Youth Development Space, $300,000. Young Scholars Program, $50,000. Uptown Theater renovations, $180,000. Utica Zoo Welcome Center is getting $2 million. Rehabilitation of the Olbelson apartment building, $3 million is going to support and revitalize that structure that was so deeply needed and unhoused so many people in a very upsetting way. Art Space, a little over $1 million for more housing. Family Housing and Wellness Center, $1 million. This one is one of my favorite. Lead and Healthy Homes Grant Supplement, $1.4 million. This is huge. We need to fund more of this wherever and whenever possible. Personally, we're still working on legislation to help support removing lead from our homes. It can't just be about the water, it needs to also be about the paint. So a lot of this 1.4 million is going towards homes and people to help get the lead out, because children, especially up to ages 6, they're so vulnerable when it comes to lead in their homes and the long-lasting impacts it has on them. I can go on and on. Again, another video. We also allocated $50,000 for emergency legal services for victims of violence, especially, during COVID, we saw an uptick. I'm glad money was just also allocated towards that. Skate parks, $2 million. That is going to fix up the west side, completely redo that one, but it's also creating a brand new, gorgeous skate park at TR Proctor. Harbor Point is also seeing up to $6 million. Phase 3, let's keep going. Brownfield remediation, $1.5 million. And then there are 6 different districts, as most of you know. We were $1.2 million was allocated, so each of us are getting $200,000. I'll do a whole nother video again breaking down what the first ward is looking to do with that funding and what some of the other ones have been doing. $1 million is going towards Varick Street, and that will be a complete streetscape renovation. We have a lot of trees that unfortunately aren't going to make it and they need to come down. Those will be taken down, new trees up, more benches, I hope. And if not, this is my pitch saying more benches. WESTSIDE Senior Center is getting $1 million. City Parks, ADA compliance, $1.4 million. Johnson Park Center, $1 million. Roscoe Conkling Park, $7.8 million. Renaissance Center, $400,000. The other half of the gun violence prevention is $1.5 million. Paving, City of Utica is spending $2 million for the roads. We have $1 million going to our Utica Fire Department truck refurbishments, $1.2 million going to DPW equipment and 4 snowplows, because The Bertolini Clubhouse is getting $2 million in renovations, and then another $1 million is going towards the body cams for the police department. And then they did city government COVID healthcare protective measures. That's $750,000. Utica Fire Department exhaust systems, $275,000. Utica Fire Department, another $550,000 for the truck refurbishments. Anita Stevens Swan Humane Society, to help the pet population control, they are receiving $250,000. Pretty much wraps up the $60 million. Of course, inside all of these projects are even more details. I'm personally encouraged by this list. Some projects certainly more than others. I think that's how everybody's going to see it. But just because one thing is getting funded doesn't necessarily mean something else isn't, because we have $60 million, a one-time check here to try to reinvest in our city. Personally, I didn't think one-time funding like this should go solely towards reoccurring expenses. And frankly, our taxes need to go towards that. We need to be able to afford it. So that's sort of just, I see it as like the cost of living in a city. And my last bit of context is our city budget is $74.4 million. So when Utica gets $60 million and you have to use it by the end of 2024, I'm really glad we had so much input already from the DRI for the years prior. And then the Utica Prosperity Initiative survey, it just really helped get us prepared. And you know what? This does not touch all the needs in the city at all. I don't want to just see these projects be done, but I really want to have follow-up of what was the outcome? How many people shop at a marketplace? How many people now have housing who were vulnerable and didn't before? How many kids use the parks regularly? I want to see the numbers from that. So while we have over 50 projects and $60 million being funded, I think it's a really great opportunity for Utica to look long-term at the patterns of what was the most valuable, what was the biggest bang for the buck. So the city has been making announcements on these projects one at a time as they roll out and the phases, but there's so many projects happening. So I'm trying to give it to you in the easiest form possible. So thank you for tuning in. If you have more questions on anything with this or any other part of the city that you want to learn more about, if it's the codes department, DPW, how the assessor's office works, let me know. I would love to give a whole little tutorial and brief recap. We'll get to them in time, but I'd rather prioritize what it is you're exactly looking for. So thanks.